This is IBM Museum. In this video, I'm going to be pulling out the PS2 Model 85 K/N planer. This is my working system. I want to go through and get this corrosion cleaned up around the SCSI interface, those three capacitors that are in the system, because this looked worse than my non-working system. And for this video, I'll probably just go through and pull the planer, get the corrosion done, and go through and pull those capacitors in another video, putting the system back in and testing to verify that it still works. I do have intentions of putting OS2 warp on this system in a CD-ROM. So I had to go through and add a CD-ROM drive onto this as well. But I'm going to get turned around and just start working on things. I've got the screws out of for the planer. I've just got to disconnect some cables, and I've already got the RAM out as well. Whether I go through, I guess I can pull this cache module just to get it out of the way. And lastly, I just have to go through and pull I did part of this for my other system, and it ended up being a long production and just really didn't work out very well for being a production video. These cables are pinned underneath this, and I thought it was just with this. I can't remember how I did it on my other one, and I couldn't get it. It didn't ultimately come loose. I thought there's like a latch or something that went through and locks that. Okay, there we go. I think the latch is up at the top of the system. And we'll leave that in place just to trap those cables. And the planer comes, well, I said I had all the screws removed, and I didn't. One last screw, but that was probably good to hold that in place. Get into my light. I can't see the screw head, and again, I don't have, I think it's a 6mm driver for these screws. And again, I don't have one of those handy. Okay. And this planer comes out. Another screw. I've just been so hurried today and then some other things that I'm missing screws. Okay, and that is all of them. Okay, so it comes out of the back, and it actually has a swing out because that metal tower for where the power supply screw fastens in. I don't have anything still connected. I think it's just hanging up on my cables. I have disconnected. Okay, so there's the planer out of the way. I'll set this off to the side. I actually have something else. I have the video card. I'm just gonna get that power supply seated back in there. We're gonna drop this down. So I have my, wow, and that is from my light ring. Reflection. But there's a TV I have connected up to the camcorder over on the other side. It's under the light ring, and I have the video adapter that's up there. Let's set this RAM aside. That's 256 megabyte of RAM. Okay, we're going to move that. And I have the TV there to help me with a little bit of the placement, an idea of the placement. Okay, and it's inverted, isn't it? I want to go, okay. Well, there's the last capacitor, the C504, and we can see that green around it for the corrosion. And I'm going to get what I have up on the TV up for you guys. And so it should do it with that. And it's a nice field of view for my camcorder. I can't even get a tighter shot than that even. But I'm going to get the cotton swabs out and the vinegar, and at least, and I think I can't remember if I did some initial cleaning for this, and just want to get that vinegar back in there. And of course, once this is cleaned up, I'll also go through and apply that baking soda mixture that's in water, just a little bit of baking soda to neutralize any acid that might still be around. And I can go through and clean up when I go through and replace these capacitors. I'll desolder them and clean underneath that a little bit more. That's got a little bit of bluish green on it. And I don't want to be too rough on anything. On my little air nozzle fell off the back. got some little brushes. And what it seems is when these capacitors, they fume a vapor upwards, which is in this direction on the chip. Show you all my hangnails and everything. And it vents up to above the capacitor more than any like fluid dripping down or anything like that. It seems like that just vents off and goes all around, even up to a good inch away sometimes from these. And still, that one, that's ultimately a little capacitor that's in there. Down this with the white middle, it's supposed to be white. Little surface mount capacitor. I'm still seeing corrosion on either side of it, and then over that probably a plate through hole that's there. And so I may have to go through and pay a little bit more attention. Checking to see if that capacitor feels loose or not. And there's even some plate through holes there that are looking corroded. So I may want to follow that up with a little bit closer look. And I'm just amazed that this was the working planer, and it just looked worse than the one that wasn't working. Let's get over to the 503. Yeah, and this one that's where the majority of the damage was on the other planer, and it looked less than this even. And this is above, on these pins, it's above it's above where the capacitor is on when the planer is upright in the case, vertical. And again, I'll pull that capacitor out and start cleaning around it. Now it vents, and this is down below it, but also there's a coating, kind of just a white coating that it's probably the fluid or the vapors of that capacitor, and it also attracts dust and just the little fibers in the air. And that's certainly cleaning up, but less than what I'd like to see it as when I'm through. This chip seemed like it cleaned up. The legs of that cleaned up pretty good. And these plate through holes, and hopefully in the end that once I just stop the corrosion, this planer will stay functional. Okay, we just passed 16 minutes. And so, yes, I'm going to focus a little bit more, maybe after pulling that capacitor on. But having the TV display right there is excellent for understanding where I am on the board. So I wanted to try and get as much of that blue-green corrosion as I could. It doesn't look too bad up in here either. Now, just get some vinegar coated on there, and I'll have to look around the view that I have here. And with the, as I said in the previous video, or the previous video when I looked at these closer, that I just don't see this corrosion with my naked eye a lot of the time. It takes me getting some magnification of the view up for me to see that. And certainly I don't want to leave any vinegar, wet vinegar on things. Yeah, those plate through holes in, and that may be just kind of a natural color for them, that they look more black than that aqua green that signifies corrosion. And the green, I think that color ultimately comes from the copper that's in that wiring, just a small amount of copper that composes the alloy that it's used for the pins. And normally that's a salt. It's a reaction from copper to like a salt or alkali. I see some of the, I don't know if that's just evaporating around that plus sign of that capacitor. I was seeing some, I don't know if it was reacting to the corrosion. Getting most of that blue-green. I still see some of it there, however. Yeah, especially when the light goes through particular ways. And I don't want to bend these pins to this chip. I think they're probably still attached to the trace pretty well. And with that brush, it shouldn't bump those around too much. Well, it's less than what it was. And as long as I stop the corrosion when I replace the capacitors, the board should still work. And let's get looking at the last area. See how quick I dropped that into view? Maybe it's just luck, but okay. And the true test will be whether this still works, of course. That'll be in the other video. But well, that cleaned out of there pretty good. And that's a little capacitor. Again, that surface mount. Is and that's supposed to be white in the middle, and just that corrosive it acts like the corrosion is going through and eating into the capacitor itself. That may have some copper, or I'd have to see if I could find one of those capacitors that's unaffected to show what they normally look like. I do see some on the board, but maybe that's good for the end here. And who knows, that may take replacing. Certainly I'm going to do a Hail Mary on the non-working planer. I'm going to go through and run the siren iron. I'm going to have some flux, really fine tipped my USB siren iron that should be fine enough a tip to work over with some of these flux. So I'm not going to add much, not going to add solder because I don't want to bridge any pins. In particular, on the other chips, they're finer pitch than what this is even for this EEPROM. And just to go through and redo those traces around that SCSI chip called the Malibu, I think is the one where that corrosion is for that C503 capacitor. So once I get the capacitors out of here, I'll go through and I'll clean a little bit underneath where they are. This one doesn't look like it affected too much other than that pin on the corner, and that capacitor just looks in bad shape. Even this other one down here, that just looks like it's, and so let me see, we're at coming up on 27 minutes. Okay, let me see if I can, okay. That is what those capacitors are supposed to look like. Down here next to the SIM socket. All of these down here. That is what those things are supposed to look like. They're not supposed to look like the black. And even the solder at that, with this angle and the light ring, it's probably reflecting light off to the sides, and it's probably good solder on either side of that, of like that capacitor. Probably still pretty good solder off to that one, but you can see that as the closer they are to that capacitor that leaked, those things do not look. It looks like just the corrosion started to go through and seep into the capacitor body itself, and probably goes through, and the capacitance is very low anyway, but probably affects that value to some extent. So once those caps come out of there, the bigger ones, and that's the Nichicon cap that leaked. It's the first on that chart. And I'll load up that page again for reference. I did that before, of where those capacitors are for anyone that has one of these K/N planers. And I advise that those be cleaned immediately, because you want to stop that corrosion where it is. And if you have a working planer, to keep it working. Hopefully I can get that other one working. If not, there's a solution that may be coming in the mail through me, an offer I've had from a long ways away, ultimately, for that board. And I hope it's not affected as much either. When I get it in, I can take a look over it like this. If the prior gracious person that's talked about sending it to me does not look it over. And I'm sure he's going to go through and look it over and verify some things too. But I'll have the video up on going further and replacing the capacitors and making sure that all these areas are cleaned out from the corrosion and get that further baking soda solution in there to reduce any acid effects, and get this back in the system to verify that it continues to work, that we stopped the corrosion, that everything's going to be fine to get ready to prepare for that OS2 warp installation. And I think that'll be a great video as well. But if you enjoy this sort of content, click on that like button, please. And by all means, subscribe to my channel. I've hit 200 subscribers today. That's fantastic. But at a minimum, I would like to see 5 times that amount. I want to get to the point where I get at least 1,000 subscribers so I can make YouTube announcements. That enables me to go through and put little comment posts and everything else of what upcoming videos are, even problems that I encounter in a little bit of that video production and other aspects. But it's just a way of notifying the subscriber base of upcoming things. And I would have liked to do some of this, like the soldering and trying to repair the bad planer and testing if it works. I'd almost like a live session and being like a couple hours, few hours, weekend time that I would go through and coordinate with where I could have viewers watching it. But the critical part is the announcement and getting the word out for people of the time frame to watch that. And there's a few people that follow on Facebook and things like that places I can make announcements. But I need to hit that 1,000 subscribers. And the way to do that is to pass the word around and try and get more people to watch these videos. But that is all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.